The Assembly Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Black.
Here.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Present.
Assemblywoman Martinez.
Present.
Assemblyman Matthews.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Here.
Chair Flores.
Present. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please let the record reflect all members are present, and we do have a quorum. Good morning, members. Happy Friday. I want to remind everybody to please keep your microphone on mute unless you are speaking, and that you please keep your camera on at all times. Should you have to turn it off, just please give us a quick heads up so that we're aware of what's happening. We have 3 items on the agenda. For those of you following us virtually, please know that we intend to take them in the order they appear. So we'll take Assembly Bill 304 first, Assembly Bill 333 second, and then lastly, Assembly Bill 385. For those of you wishing to speak during public comment, know that we'll do that at the very end of the meeting. And lastly, just out of respect, know that you'll often see us looking in multiple directions. That's just because we have a very unique setup in our own office. Don't take that as a sign of disrespect. With that, we'll go ahead and open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 304. We have Speaker Frierson. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the well-known hardworking Committee on Government Affairs. My name is Jason Frierson, for the record, Assemblyman for District 8 and Speaker of the Nevada State Assembly, here to present AB 304. I run the risk of jinxing myself when I say a bill is simple, but AB 304 is a rather simple bill and expands the mental health continuing education that peace officers complete yearly to also include crisis intervention. This bill was originally an effort to make sure that law enforcement was trained on dealing with mental health issues. And it became obvious to me in speaking with other law enforcement organizations that they were already implementing some form of this, but there are terms of art in the law enforcement community that need to be taken into account. And it's not a one-size-fits-all type of issue. So a larger law enforcement agency may have a more extensive program, and they may also provide that education to smaller law enforcement agencies. So in speaking with the law enforcement community in post, it became apparent that the better way to do it would be to incorporate what some are already doing into law that is currently in regulation. And so that's kind of a background of how we got here today. AB 304, again, deals specifically with crisis intervention. According to data from the National Conference of State Legislatures, at least 27 states and the District of Columbia have laws requiring officers to be trained to respond to mental health, substance use, and behavioral disorder issues. In theory, the role of our criminal justice system seems simple enough on the surface: enforce your approved laws and penalize those who break the laws. However, in practice, the responsibilities we placed on our criminal justice system, in particular our peace officers, has only expanded. Individuals experiencing mental health crises are more likely to encounter law enforcement than receive medical assistance. When someone is experiencing a mental health crisis, family, friends, good Samaritans typically call 911 first. This means that many of our law enforcement officers, by no fault of their own, are responding to calls they frankly lack the knowledge, support, and resources to effectively handle. Peace officers are trained law enforcement, not mental health providers. However, as first responders, it's critical that we give peace officers the tools that they need to help our vulnerable and at-risk populations. Crisis intervention training can vary, but in general, the overall goals of crisis intervention training are to improve peace officers' understanding of mental illness and available community resources, increase an officer's confidence in managing incidents, involving a person with a mental illness, and develop skills related to verbal de-escalation to diffuse a mental health crisis and reduce use of force. This training criteria promotes diversion to mental health services rather than arrests. Again, AB 304 is rather short. The Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission shall establish, well, they already established minimum standards for continuing education requirements for peace officers to be completed annually. Currently, training related to mental health is already required. Section 1C2 of this bill expand the continuing education requirement on mental health to include crisis intervention specifically. I want to be clear that currently in regulation, I think it's chapter 289 of the Administrative Code, crisis intervention training is already listed. AB 304 will ensure that the intent of the legislature is clear, that crisis intervention should be a priority for our law enforcement officers and part of their continual education. That concludes my introductory remarks. I originally had prepared to have Taylor Allison, who serves in many roles, but is the chair of the Douglas County Behavioral Health Task Force and chair of the Northern Regional Behavioral Health Policy Board. She actually has a couple other titles. She was unable to be here today, but I have coordinated with law enforcement, both Metro and Post, on this issue. And really what brought this home to me was I saw a story of a mental health call where law enforcement showed up and there was someone having a mental health crisis, and they were sitting down, I believe it was in a store, and the officer remarkably about 10 feet away sat down on the floor across and completely de-escalated the situation, and there was no violence, and that individual was able to get the mental health assistance that person needed. And I think that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to think outside the box and make sure that officers are trained to deal with this situation when de-escalation or intervention otherwise is a better way. And so with that, that's Assembly Bill 304, and I would welcome any questions.
Thank you, Speaker. Members, at this time, we'll open it up for questions. And I am now checking the chat. I do believe Speaker Frierson did a good job summarizing the genesis and purpose of the bill, and I think reading through the language was rather quick for us. I don't believe we may have a question for you, Speaker. I don't think you jinxed yourself when you said it would be a quick hearing. But one more time, if I accidentally skipped anybody, feel free to unmute yourself and state your name for the record at this time. Seeing none, at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 304.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 304, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 196, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Eric Spratley, E-R-I-C-S-P-R-A-T-L-E-Y, the Executive Director of the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association, here in support of Assembly Bill 304, and we appreciate Speaker Frierson bringing this forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Next caller wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 304.
Caller with the last three digits of 318. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores and members of the committee. This is Kendra Birchie, B-E-R-T-S-C-H-Y, with the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. We want to thank Speaker Frierson for bringing forward this important legislation. Unfortunately, mental health crises are treated not as a public health issue, but instead rather as a police issue. And we just want to make sure that the police officers who are asked to serve, to attend a scene where there is someone who is in the middle of a mental health crisis, that they have the proper training to know how to appropriately handle that situation. We appreciate all the hard work that's been done already by our law enforcement officers involving this issue, and we hope to continue that progress. So thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Next caller wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 304.
Caller with the last three digits of 014. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores and the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs. My name is Christopher Reese, R-I-E-S, on behalf of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I would first like to thank Speaker Frierson for bringing forth Assembly Bill 304 and offer our support. LVMPD has been at the forefront regarding crisis intervention training, and each new officer receives CIT training during their academy experience. Crisis intervention techniques continue to be an important part of de-escalation strategies. This continuing training is a significant portion of being able to identify a person in crisis quickly and effectively, and getting that person the resources they need safely and efficiently. We agree with this training being codified into law. Again, thank you, Speaker Frierson, and we extend our support of AB 304.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Next caller wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 304.
Caller with the last three digits of 611. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Flores and members of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs. This is John Piro, Johnpiro, from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. We'd like to thank Speaker Frierson for bringing this bill forward. After watching many hours of body cam, I've seen officers respond very well to mental health crises, and I've seen officers respond not so well to mental health crises. So I think codifying some training is going to help all of us, because a large portion of what we're seeing down south relates to mental health and the inadequacies in our mental health system, where that's forcing police to have to respond to things that perhaps they shouldn't be forced to respond to, but that's the nature of where we're at. So requiring appropriate training will result in better outcomes. And so we're grateful for the Speaker for bringing this bill forward. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, Sheriff. Next caller wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 304.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 304, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll invite those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 304.
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 304, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position to Assembly Bill 304.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 304, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. Speaker Frierson, any closing remarks you may have?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, members of the committee. I think I'll count my blessings before it happens, and I thank you all for your time and attention and interest in this very important issue.
Thank you, Speaker Frierson. And I really do believe that's the fastest hearing we've had in this committee this entire session. So thank you. We appreciate that. At this time, we'll close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 304. And next, we'll open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 333. Assemblywoman Krasner, good morning, welcome, and whenever you're ready.
Yes, good morning, Chair Flores and members of the Assembly Government Affairs Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today before you. For the record, I am Assemblywoman Lisa Krasner, representing Nevada State Assembly District 26. I am here today to introduce Assembly Bill 333. I have with me two co-presenters, Michael Pagney and Don Padalock, to present Assembly Bill 333 to the committee and to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Members of the committee. Michael Pani, McDonald Carano, representing Hines Ranch Land Company. Thank you to Assemblywoman Krasner for the introduction. Assembly Bill 333 involves local government land use planning matters and essentially has two components. The first, Section 1, addresses the procedures for seeking judicial review of local government land use decisions and seeks to improve the efficiency and timeliness of judicial review. Under current law, an aggrieved person may seek judicial review by filing a petition within 25 days of the final decision. These actions are in the nature of an appeal and are decided by submission of briefs. However, nothing in the current law addresses when those briefs must be filed, which in practice has led to considerable delay in ensuring the important constitutional property rights at issue are submitted to courts in a timely fashion. In fact, it's not uncommon for it to take 1 or more years for judicial decisions, leaving the development status of land in limbo and creating an opportunity for abuse by opponents seeking to delay a project. Section 1 adds timeframes for when briefs must be filed: 40 days for the opening brief, 30 days for the answering brief, and 30 days for a reply. The forms of the briefs must comply with the forms for appellate briefs under Nevada Rules of Appellate Procedures. Within 7 days of completing the briefs, any party may request a hearing. 2 items to note about these procedures. First, the proposed briefing schedule is identical to the briefing schedule already codified in the Administrative Procedures Act under NRS 233B-133, which governs judicial review of state agency decisions. The APA schedule has been in place for over 30 years, works very well in practice, and avoids the delays and abuses seen in the local government review process. Second, like the APA, the bill also grants courts the ability to extend the time if good cause is shown. This avoids any concerns of interfering with the exercise of judicial discretion. We've all heard the phrase, justice delayed is justice denied. Section 1 seeks to address that concern, eliminating the opportunity for abuse of the judicial system through delayed prosecution of land use appeals and protecting due process and timely adjudication of constitutional property rights. The second element of the bill is contained in Section 2, and the intent of this section is to codify the historic practices of the state engineer and recognize that when local governments require management of stormwater runoff created by new development, that stormwater management does not require a water right permit. Under existing law, cities and counties are authorized to regulate development of land, which regulation often includes imposing requirements for the retention or detention of nuisance stormwater flows created by development. A simple example to think of is the development of a parking lot. When it's dirt, some of the rain soaks into the ground, some collects in puddles, some drains off. But once that lot is paved, the rain which used to puddle or soak into the ground now hits the pavement and all of it runs off to the property next door. It is this increase in stormwater runoff that we're talking about, that nuisance stormwater flow that's created by the construction of new pavement and rooftops. When development occurs, cities and counties impose engineering requirements on projects to manage these nuisance stormwater flows and to ensure the post-development runoff is not worse than the pre-development runoff. They do this either by retaining or holding the nuisance stormwater in basins on the site so that it can soak into the ground or evaporate, or by detaining or slowing down the stormwater. So when it eventually runs off, the amount of runoff is the same or less than what ran off before. Currently, state engineer does not require a water right permit for this type of nuisance stormwater management. However, with the exception of certain projects in Clark County, the exemption is not explicitly set out in statute. The intent of this bill is to codify that historic practice, allowing local governments to manage nuisance stormwater created by new development and avoid the administrative burden and unintended consequences of requiring a new water right for nuisance stormwater permits. While we agree with and support the state engineer's historic approach to these issues, there is some concern that without explicitly recognizing the exemption in statute, Chapter 533 could be construed as requiring a water right appropriation, which would have significant unintended consequences. You can imagine the enormous financial burden to the state and local governments if they were required to obtain a water right every time they built a highway or a road, or how development could grind to a halt in over-appropriated basins where no new water rights are available, or the significant administrative burden and cost that would be imposed on the state engineer if they had to review every single development project in the state. It could also put local governments in basins where no new water rights are available in the untenable position of choosing between managing stormwater responsibly or being exposed to takings claims, since their stormwater management plan would necessarily require taking someone else's water right. It could also give rise to speculators filing blanket permits on nuisance stormwater flows to leverage payoffs from developers, unnecessarily increasing the price of housing and other development. Section 2 recognizes that where retention of nuisance stormwater is required by a city or a county on new development, that stormwater management does not require a water right permit. It's worth noting that nothing in this bill would affect other stormwater permits that are required for construction, such as NDEP construction stormwater permits, stormwater pollution prevention plans, or similar permits related to water quality. It would simply allow local governments to continue responsible stormwater management on new development without implicating any new water right appropriations. We have discussed this bill with the state engineer, and while there was no concern with the intent, the state engineer believes the language could be narrowed and clarified to avoid unintentionally encompassing other types of waters that are currently regulated by the state engineer. So we intend to continue to work with stakeholders, including the state engineer, City of Reno and Eureka County, and hope to have a consensus amendment soon that addresses their issues, including a population cap that will exclude the rural counties. With that, I will turn it over to Don Padlock for additional comment.
Thank you, Michael. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Don Padlock. I'm the general manager of Hines Ranch Land Company, and we're the developers of a 5,000 home master plan community within the city of Reno. And a little bit of history, I don't intend to retrace Mr. Pawney's testimony. He did a tremendous job. Just going to provide a little bit of background as to why we're here and why this is coming forward now. Some of the recent history with the storm events we had in the winters of 2016-17 and 17-18 really created flooding issues within the city of Reno and Washoe County, particularly in the North Valleys. And the flooding issues really put a spotlight on development, the stormwater management and the creation of these flows, as well as the jurisdictional management of these flows. Given the situation we all experienced, everyone has been working extremely hard to address the situations that occurred and working hard to avoid them in the future. With the uncertainty of climate change, the variability in the weather patterns, from our perspective as a developer of a large project, we believe we have one chance to get flood control done correctly and to be able to protect public safety in the future. Which, through this effort, the focus turned to the statute and how we manage stormwater in the state, and that's where 533.030 came to light for us and the unintended consequences that resulted. 030 exempts Clark County from a water appropriation for any flood control structures, which I believe is good policy for the state. However, the exclusion from the exemption implies that all other jurisdictions would require a water appropriation for the stormwater facilities. Now, historically and currently, the state engineer does not require a water appropriation for stormwater management. And AB 333 simply seeks to close a loophole that was created in 030 and codify the existing practice of the state engineer as it relates to stormwater management facilities resulting from a local government's flood control policy. Mr. Pawney detailed the de minimis flows we're talking about here. These are not water rights created for beneficial use. So I just want to make sure that these are nuisance flows and they are managed for public safety. There are lots of nuances in the water law, and we want to be very careful that we are not creating unintended consequences. There have been stakeholders involved in the initial conversations here, and the language is being refined. So in closing, I'd just like to thank Assemblywoman Krasner for taking leadership on this important issue for public safety within the state, and the Division of Water Resources and the state engineer for their time and help crafting this language and getting it right. City of Reno is heavily involved in this, as is Washoe County. Truckee Meadows Water Authority has provided input, and as well as Eureka County. So with that, I will close my initial remarks here, and we're available for any questions that may arise. Thank you.
Thank you all for your presentation this morning. And at this time, we'll open it up for questions, and we'll start with Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Chairman Flores. Thank you, Assemblywoman Krasner, Mr. Pagney, and Mr. Padalock. I appreciate all of this information. I'm trying to, I guess, conceptualize or understand this in a practical matter. Is there a way that you could kind of walk me through how this happens? Because I guess I get it a little hung up with some of the wording in one of the attachments. So storm water runoff generated by the development. Can you walk me through a scenario of when this has happened or what occurs?
Yes, through the chair, Michael Pani, and I'll defer to Don also if he's got some other examples. But the parking lot example I gave, when before it gets developed, it's just vacant land. And when rain falls or precipitation occurs, that water either soaks into the ground, it may puddle on site, or some of it may run off to the neighboring properties. As soon as that's improved with impervious improvements like pavement or rooftops, that water now, instead of doing what it used to do, it hits that pavement and it gets accelerated and it all flows off site. So the local governments, when they approve a development project, this is one of the things they're looking at. They want to make sure that when that water flows off, it doesn't harm any of the other properties. And so there's engineering techniques where you create basins, if you will. You may have seen some of these on the side of the road, where they can collect that water and either slow it down so it flows off the property kind of in the same manner it used to do before you built the parking lot, or it just holds it on site in kind of a pond and just lets it evaporate off or soak into the ground on site. So again, you're not harming the neighboring properties because you're building it. The question is, when those local governments, as a matter of public health and safety, are trying to manage these stormwater flows, these nuisance flows to prevent harm, do you have to have a water right for actually holding that water in a detention basin or a retention basin? And as Don indicated, historically, the state engineer has not required that water right permit. And we're just trying to codify that historic practice, because if you were to have to go out and try to secure a water right permit every time you put in a parking lot, you're taking water that should be available for beneficial use, for drinking water, for irrigation. And now all of a sudden you're just kind of capturing and holding it to sit in a detention basin for stormwater, which really doesn't serve good policy purposes.
Follow-up, Chair?
Follow-up, please.
Thank you. Thank you. That hearing that again kind of now contextualizes all of it for me. So I really appreciate that example. So I guess my question is, just using this example, say that there's for some reason a homeowner in the property next to this parking lot development. If that homeowner captured that water and wanted to use it for their own, is this where this issue of litigation comes in? Like, as I know it might be a crazy example, but if you can maybe give me an example of that, where that litigation.
Yes, and through the chair, Michael Panya again. So the litigation concern that we had, there's a number of different aspects. One, there's just the litigation aspect of discharging new water onto that neighbor's property and causing damage from the stormwater flooding. So that's what the local government engineering requirements avoid. They're managing that stormwater so it doesn't harm the neighboring property. The second issue is, do I have to actually secure a water right permit to hold that? So this, keep in mind that the type of water we're talking about isn't water that you could today go get an appropriation on. This is not like water off of a riverbed or where you drill a well, pull it out of the ground. These are new nuisance flows that are only created because we've put pavement down on the land, if you will. And so the concern that I raised with the takings is if you have a basin where all of the water rights have been appropriated, they're all being used for municipal use or irrigation use. There's none available to just go to the state engineer and say, hey, will you give me a new water right? If this were to be construed to say, yeah, every time you put in a parking lot, you need a new water right, there's none available. So by implementing responsible stormwater management practices, the local governments, in essence, would be effectuating a taking because they would be requiring you to take someone else's water right that might be used for irrigating a farm just to build that parking lot.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Next, we'll go to Assemblyman Ellison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only question I had was for Michael. Michael, you talked about the amendment by Eureka County. Is that still going to be an amendment to this bill?
Michael Pontius to the chair. Yes, we are working cooperatively with Eureka County, and we're looking at a consensual amendment that would put a population cap on the bill so it would not apply to Eureka County or other small rural counties at their request.
Thank you, sir.
Members, any additional questions? If I could just ask a question and if you could just walk me through how this normally happens. Say there is a vacant lot, and we'll call that lot A, and I own the adjacent lot B. And because the vacant lot A has been there consistently for X amount of years, and there's been a runoff from that vacant lot A coming onto lot B, that benefits me in some way, either because I have some type of irrigation system that is being partially fed from what I consistently see happening in lot A coming on to B. Is there ever a weird dynamic in that relationship where once that new development is coming into place, that there has to be some type of relationship structure so that I can still continue to reap that benefit that I was getting before? Or because I never had any type of control over lot A, there isn't a requirement for me to try to establish some type of relationship with my ownership in lot B? Or is that even a hypothetical that you don't necessarily see often? You don't encounter that?
Mr. Chair, Michael Pontius again. Great question. So if that water that's coming off of your lot A to lot B is a consistent perennial source of water, it's one that's flowing all the time, such that you could go to the state engineer and ask to get a permit to put that to beneficial use, this bill and that development would not affect that whatsoever. You cannot develop the land in a way that would impair your ability to continue to use that permitted water right for a beneficial use. What we're talking about here is a different kind of a water right, a different type of water. It's that nuisance flow, the increase. So what's flowing to lot B right now, the development of lot A is going to increase that. And so the local governments have to manage. It's basically a do no harm approach. They want to make sure that they're not putting more water onto your lot B than is flowing there right now. And so we're trying to talk about how do local governments regulate that new additional nuisance water? And do you really need to get a water right permit for something that is an intermittent nuisance flow that isn't something you could ever put to beneficial use to begin with?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may, it's a great question, and we deal with this all the time in the development world. The way we manage stormwater now, if I'm the owner of parcel A and you're the owner of parcel B, and I come in and I develop, say a charter school, and I have a parking lot and rooftops and playgrounds, the development of my project is not permitted to increase the amount of runoff that now impacts your property. And we handle that through all the jurisdictional codes. We are required to either slow the water down and release it on a normal basis as it would flow, Or what normally happens, we are required to hold the water that we create. So in terms of, let's say there was 1 acre foot of water that normally flowed off our property onto yours. And with the new project, it now became 2 acre feet of water because of the hard surfaces would be exiting our property. We're required to hold on our property that 1 acre foot of water. And that is where it comes in the issue. Do we require a water appropriation to hold the water that we've created by our hard surfaces? So by code, we are not allowed to impact your property, and this is how we manage it. It's not a beneficial use. We are not irrigating out of this. We are not serving municipal use out of this. This is not a stock water right. This is purely a stormwater management, and that water either infiltrates into the ground or evaporates out of the pond. I hope that helps address your question.
Absolutely, thank you. And again, and that sets the record clear that this is not a scenario where a parcel will in any way get less than what they're already getting, but rather what happens when there's a nuisance because they're getting more. And I think that makes it abundantly clear for everybody. I appreciate that. Members, any additional questions? Seeing none at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 333. Assemblywoman Krasner, do we have anybody else joining us via Zoom that was hoping to testify in support? I don't believe we do, but I just want to double check with you.
No, those are my two co-presenters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So at this time, we'll go to the phone lines to those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 333. Thank you.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 333, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 175. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores and members of the committee. For the record, this is Lindsay Knox, Lindsay, KNOX, with McDonough Carano, on behalf of the Nevada Home Builders Association. The NVHBA is a statewide advocacy organization for the home building industry and is governed by the Builders Association of Northern Nevada and the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. AB 333 codifies and clarifies a long-standing unwritten rule that no water right appropriation is necessary for surface stormwater retention and detention as part of a local government's floodwater control policy. This type of de minimis retention and detention has no real impact on downstream users, but is important to protect the community from significant stormwater events like we experienced in Nevada in 2017. AB 333 also provides an established briefing schedule for land use appeals, ensuring that builders and local governments can obtain prompt judicial review and that much needed building projects are not unnecessarily delayed in court. Overall, AB 333 aligns with NVHBA's goal to promote policy that reduces and controls the cost of building homes. The bill removes any uncertainty over de minimis water issues and creates a more efficient land use appeal process. These types of policies mean homes can be built faster and with less cost. The sale price of a home is always in direct correlation to the cost to build it. AB 333 helps our builders community bring more affordable homes to market. We thank Assemblywoman Krasner for bringing this bill forward and are proud to stand in support. Thank you.
And thank you for calling and joining us this morning. Next caller in support of Assembly Bill 333.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 068. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Aaron West, AARONWEST. I'm CEO of the Nevada Builders Alliance, here today in support of AB 333. In the interest of brevity, I would say I ditto the comments of Lindsay Knox. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in support of Assembly Bill 333.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 229. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. My name is Jamie Rodriguez, spelled JamieRodriguez. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for Washoe County. I wanted to thank the bill sponsor for bringing forward the bill. We do support the intent behind the legislation, understanding the concerns of some of the other jurisdictions that were mentioned during the bill hearing, and wanted to direct the committee to a letter submitted on Nellis from my Director of Engineering in Washoe County, believing that we believe that this is a good policy that should move forward. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Next caller in support of Assembly Bill 333.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 500. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Dan Morgan, DANMORGAN, CEO of the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. I would like to thank, and we would like to thank Assemblywoman Krasner for bringing this bill forward. As the presenters and several others have stated, AB 333 codifies and clarifies the longstanding rules that no water appropriation is necessary for surface stormwater retention and detention as part of local government's flood control. In the interest of brevity, I won't state what everybody else stated, but the Builders Association of Nevada is very much in support of AB 333. Thank you very much for your time and your service to our great state.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Next caller in support of Assembly Bill 333.
Testify in support of Assembly Bill 333. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we would like to invite those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 333.
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 333, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 323, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores and committee members. For the record, I am Steve Walker, STEVEWALKER. I'm representing Eureka County. Eureka County is opposed to AB 333 for the following reasons. Allowing stormwater basins to capture and consumptively evaporate water without some analysis of impact to existing rights, we believe is inconsistent with existing water law, particularly when capture exceeds 20,000 gallons, recognized as de minimis use for NRS 533.027 for wildlife guzzlers. Additionally, if this occurs in designated basins, examples, hydrographic basins around urban and agricultural areas, where new permits are not allowed, the water evaporation needs to be accounted for via a water right. Eureka County would welcome continued dialogue with the bill's sponsors to see if our issue can be addressed. Thank you.
And thank you. Next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 333.
Chair, there are no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position to Assembly Bill 333.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 333, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 874, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chair Flores and members of the committee, for the record, Callie Wilsey with the City of Reno. That's CALLIWIL, S as in Sam, EY. Thank you for the opportunity to provide information as part of the hearing on AB 333 today. We are neutral on this bill and appreciate the bill sponsor reaching out to the City of Reno with their goals and intent in advance of today's hearing. The city's zoning code, which was adopted in January 2021 after a multi-year public engagement process, includes development requirements for areas that are subject to flooding. The purpose of these requirements is to safeguard the public health, safety, and welfare of our neighborhoods. In our closed basins, development plans must include on-site detention retention basins that are adequately sized to mitigate the increase of stormwater runoff as a result of the development to a minimum mitigation ratio of 1 to 1.3 during the 100-year 10-day storm. These mitigation measures are directly focused on ensuring we're able to protect the health and safety of our residents as our community grows and evolves. In addition, if additional information is needed, we're happy to follow up with the committee. We look forward to continuing to work with the bill sponsor on the amendment that was mentioned. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today.
And thank you for joining us. We'll continue with those wishing to testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 333.
Caller with the last three digits of 940. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Flores and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Chris Thorson, CHRISTHORSON, and I'm a Deputy Administrator with the Division of Water Resources. I'm here on behalf of the Division of Water Resources to testify neutral on AB 333. As you heard from the bill sponsor, the division is committed to continue working with the bill sponsors toward language that is mutually acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll continue with those wishing to testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 333.
Chair, there are no more callers in the neutral position at this time.
Great. And lastly, if we could have our Assemblywoman come back and any closing remarks you may have.
Yes, I just want to say thank you, Chair Flores and committee members, for your time today. I appreciate it. We are committed to continuing to work with anybody who is in opposition or neutral so that everyone is in the support position. And I would appreciate your support on AB 333. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 333. And next, we'll open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 385. We have our Majority Leader, Benitez Thompson, here. Good morning, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you so much, members of Government Affairs Committee, for entertaining the notion that I'm bringing to you today, the concepts and values in Assembly Bill 385. This bill is being brought because of certain trends that I'm starting to see in public boards and how they negotiate contracts for employment. And when the contracts are negotiated for employment at the beginning of employment, we're just seeing a trend where some conversations around fringe benefits, some conversations around automatic severance pay are negotiated in on the front end, and then on the back end, we see public boards having their hands tied and their ability to talk about perhaps the best and highest use of public dollars as people are exiting, but they've already, kind of walked themselves into a corner on the front end with some of these contractual obligations. So really, that is the heart of what this bill is looking to get at. If you look to the conceptual amendment, I will go ahead and walk you through it. The conceptual amendment to Section 1, that this bill will only apply to employees whose contract is approved by a public body, not including contracts subject to collective bargaining. So I really am looking to get at specific sets of employees here. So these are not people who are classified positions. These are not people who are living within a structure of steps and grades, because you kind of have a predictable path that's very transparent to the public to follow for how that pay is working, or how that pay flows out for employees, groups, and classes, or specific management groups that have collective bargaining for certain management groups in there. These are really individual contracts for individual employees that rise to the level of being presented to the public body for approval. Second, this would apply in instances where the employee resides upon the initiation of an investigation for wrongdoing or is terminated based upon the findings of an investigation. And so in the original bill, what this is referring to is in section 1.1 that when employees like this are leaving an organization, and if they happen to be in a process of investigation, then the board cannot at that point award any additional pay or bonuses until the completion of an investigation. And this is to prevent, once again, a trend where we see a high-level person exiting and the board committing additional pay past the date of employment to that person, kind of a severance pay, and then finding out that we have the results of an investigation that are unfavorable towards that person and have the public wondering why in the world that person got to exit with additional pay when they were found, when we didn't know the outcome of the investigation. It just seems best to have public bodies really wait to see what that outcome is before they have to award a severance pay or bonuses that were negotiated in at the beginning of a contract. 3, clarify that an employee may receive a retirement buyout or a partial buyout. So what I'm really looking to get at is nothing that's merit-based, nothing that this particular employee might have accrued or earned or that would otherwise be given. So a good example of this would be in some local governments during the recession, we saw them offer buyouts to large employee groups in order to reduce the amount of their payroll to help balance out their general fund obligations. Those kind of packages that are offered to employee groups are not the ones that I am targeting. These are really, once again, contracts that are negotiated with specific individuals and what's negotiated at the front end of a contract that ties the hand of a public body when that person leaves under certain circumstances. Number 4 would be clarify that an employee is entitled to payment of any type of accrued leave in addition to annual leave, comp pay, or sick leave authorized by law. So once again, this was something that the local governments were asking for more clarity on, that anything that has been earned by the employee during the time of their employment is theirs. This would be when I talk about severance pay or severance bonuses, that those are additional pots of money that the employee has not otherwise earned, can you say. There were pots of money negotiated in at the front end of a contract. So that was just trying to draw a better line of distinction for folks about what the intent of this bill was. Section 2 is deleted, except to provide the compensation set by a negotiated contract shall not include fringe benefits not otherwise made available to other employees. So once again, this is just a head off at the pass, a new trend that we are seeing. We're on the front end of these contracts. You see fringe benefits above and beyond what other public employees might be offered being negotiated in. I just personally feel like you got to kind of tell public bodies, here are things that you're not going to be allowed to contract and negotiate on. Here, that these kinds of things perhaps aren't the best and highest use of taxpayer dollars and taxpayer money. And so we should probably just say you're prohibited from doing this, because otherwise boards will have the pressure and have been getting the pressure to kind of negotiate in fringe that you might see in a corporate environment, but you typically don't see in a public environment. And so I think we want to get away from that practice. Section 3 remains the same with an enactment date of October 1st. So all existing contracts that are out there are fine and will continue to go on. It's any new contracts, contract amendments, or renewals after October 1st. So the way that I think of this is if you've got a contract that expires in the next year, and then you've got to re-up in a new contract, and you're someone who's subject to this, then that contract would have to be renegotiated with these principles being considered by that public body. I think that there are many good examples of these trends that we've had play out in our community, but this is general law. So I did kind of want to steer clear from specific examples because I think that this is a newer trend. And I think that the best thing to do is just say, lesson learned. Let's kind of make sure that we are, a public body isn't inadvertently tying their hands on dollars that they have to award out on the back end of a contract and then move forward. With that being said, Chair, I am open for questions.
Thank you, Majority Leader. And with that, we'll open it up for questions. I am now reviewing the chat. And we'll start off with Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Majority Leader Benitez Thompson, for bringing this forward. I have a few questions. My first has to do with, is this only for the I'm just going to use my world of, let's just say school districts. So this would this only be for a superintendent, or would this be for any member of a leadership team that has to be approved by the governing body?
Thank you so much for the question. So the intent would be really for, when you say leadership team, I believe that you mean people who are not otherwise in a classified group, and also not in a management group that is collectively bargained. So then that typically is where you get to your management team. So if they have individual contracts that are going to be approved by a board, then I would say yes.
So thank you. Thank you for that clear. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, may I have a follow-up?
Follow-up, please.
Thank you. So just to clarify, so let's say that it is and I'm just going to, again, make up a position. Let's just say that it's the City of Sparks, and it is their communications director that has a separate contract that is not being followed by a collective bargaining agreement because it is such a very specific area that it has that different contract. That's kind of what you're referring to anything at all when it comes to these.
I am. And the good thing is there's no specific reference to, I know you mentioned the City of Sparks just for example, but there's no specific example from that public body. But to the question that you are asking, and I just wanted to say that just to make sure that no one thought we were pointing a finger at them. But it would be. So it's these individual contracts that are negotiated and brought to a public body for contemplation and approval. And they typically don't fall, there's typically just a handful of these within these public bodies, because otherwise you have employment, salary, and benefit structures that are dictated. And so you've got some boundaries around that. But within these contracted positions, hypothetically, the board can put in almost anything that a person requests. And so that's where we're trying to put in some boundaries to say, here are certain things that the board ought not to be able to entertain.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that clarification. Also, I was not trying to go after one city or county or school district or anything like that. That was just an example. So then my second question is, again, trying to make sure that I've got a what if situation. Let's say that there's a budget cut and all employees have to take a cut of some sort. Would this also, is there I know that there's some clauses sometimes that if you're at the executive level, you are basically excused from that. Would that be a part of this as well? Would that still allow that, or is it trying to address that all employees are equal, and if there's a 5% cut at the custodial position, there should also be a 5% cut at the highest person position?
I actually think that's a wonderful question. I think it has been a newer trend to have clauses that prohibit pay cut to be considered by a board written into the front end of a contract. So essentially you have one person who can negotiate a recession-proof contract. And I think that's fair to contemplate. As it stands right now in this amendment, it doesn't contemplate that, but I think it would be interesting to hear from, I think that within the set of principles and values that I'm trying to get at with that, it makes sense to say that you ought not to build into a negotiated contract a clause that says that the board could never contemplate or have public deliberation over a reduction of that pay. I think that makes sense. And then I guess we'll wait and see if.
I'm more than happy to work with you on, I guess we would call this the Three Musketeers, all for one and one for all.
And I think the good thing is most, I've had lots of conversations with lots of different public boards around this bill, as you can imagine. And that really, I think, seems to be a very new trend. So I don't think that there's a majority of contracts out there of public boards who have entertained such an idea, but I think there's been at least one public case more recently that has been discussed. And in that case, I think it's reasonable to say that we value not having a public board's hands tied for one person if they have to consider it for everyone else.
Thank you. I'm more than happy to work with you on that if you're open to that. And then the other question, I promise you it's my last question, Chair Flores. When it comes to the bonuses that are sometimes mentioned in, just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. I believe it's in section 2.4.B, Roman numeral 3. Wow, organizational skills are coming in on that one. When there's an increase in salary based on merit, including without limitation bonuses, are you saying that a bonus has to be tied to a goal or metrics that has been decided upon in an open meeting? Or is there a goal or metrics that has been discussed in private? I guess I'm asking for a little bit more clarification on that specific section as to how bonuses should be awarded when it comes to public bodies and the taxpayer money.
I think that that's a wonderful question. So right now, as it stands, I struck out most of section 2, but I think that once again, the amendment, the conversation about bonuses has been really interesting because many public organizations will tell you that in order to get a really qualified candidate, you kind of have to offer some kind of a bonus. Fine. I think that I get why that's a reasonable argument to make. I think where it becomes unreasonable, though, or where I think it becomes contrary to a good use of good stewardship of our public dollars is when those bonuses are automatic and without any other qualifiers. So the public body hasn't put in place specific goals or metrics to say, hey, high-level management leadership person, if you can help us reach these goals for our organization and we can successfully meet them, then we can have conversations as a public body about a bonus to you. But on the front end, we have seen a trend where those bonuses are automatically built into the pay structure without any type of tie to goals or to merit conversation. So I think it would make sense to continue to talk about bonuses and how they are written into contracts. I don't think that it's anything to be contrary to bonuses. I think that it's bonuses within the context of a board setting public record and dialogue around goals and metrics for those bonuses, which I think most do. I think that once again, I like your question because I think it's highlighting a more recent example that we've seen play out in the media where you have a contract without any reference to goals or to measures. And it's, can be $100,000 bonus. So I think most of us would reasonably think you should tie that to something.
I think you're getting where my question was coming from. So if there is a amended language, I'm more than happy to work with you on that. And thank you so much for the answers and clarifications. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Assemblywoman. We'll continue with questions. And I am once again checking the chat. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but at this time, please feel free to announce yourself. Assemblyman Ellison, we'll go to you next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to have you ask this question for me. When I looked over the bill, and I thank you for bringing the bill, one of the questions I got is the distinction between cause and no cause. And I was I thought that was in section 2. Could you answer that?
I can, yes. And so typically right now, these kind of contracts, public boards build in language that says if you are terminated for cause, then you're not entitled to these additional severance pay or bonuses. But what we see as a trend is that if a person resigns, then they're not being terminated for cause. And so what I was hoping to capture in my amendment to section 1 and what my legislative intent would be is if that person resigns, but they're in an investigation process, kind of like and they resign, then that board would have to pause and could not award additional pay. When I say severance, I want to make sure I don't mean anything that is merit-based, but I mean an additional chunk of money after the last day worked. So that additional pay severance could not be awarded until the outcome of that investigation is known.
Okay, thank you. And that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And again, I am looking through the chat once more. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Thomas, please.
Good morning, Chair. And thank you, Majority Leader Benez Thompson, for bringing Assembly Bill 385 to the forefront. My only question is, or concern is that you said that you are deleting all of section 2, but I was looking at where it looks like you have dentists and physicians and officers and employees of Nevada System of Higher Education exempt. Are you planning on keeping that or deleting that provision?
Thank you so much. So the piece I'm leaving in on section 2 refers to fringe benefits and how fringe benefits are negotiated. But what section 2 ended up doing was if section 2 were to remain in, it would probably not otherwise be a great idea. So what it is within state government, you have a rule that no employee can make more than 95% of what the governor makes, right? So our director of health and human services, all of our director positions make less than what the governor makes. And so you kind of have an established pay structure within there. And so I was seeking to try to, in working on this bill for the past year, I was looking for a way to get a better reference to some of the contracts that I was thinking about or holding in mind. And I thought that making a salary reference might work, but this worked differently than I thought. So that's why I want to strike Section 2 and only keep in the conversations about fringe benefits.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. Appreciate it, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Members, any additional questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself and announce yourself. I am looking through the chat. At this time, I don't believe we have any additional questions. Thank you, Majority Leader. And at this time, we will go to those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 385. Majority Leader, I don't see anybody else joining us via Zoom, but I wanted to confirm that in fact, you did not have somebody wishing to testify via Zoom.
I do not. This is kind of my thing.
All right, sounds good. All right, thank you, Majority Leader. And at this time, we'll go to the phone lines and we'll invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 385.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 385, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 229, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. Jamie Rodriguez, spelled Jamie-Rodriguez. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for Washoe County, and I want to thank Assemblywoman Benitez-Thompson for reaching out to us on this bill and working with us. The bill, as originally drafted, we had concerns that it would loop in a multitude of employees unintentionally, and so very much so appreciate the conceptual amendment and helping address that so that we don't have staff who are part of public boards primarily just because of the position, or not primarily, solely because of the position that they have at the county. So we do support the conceptual amendment. The one thing that I do want to put on the record is point number 4 for the conceptual amendment to Section 1 does talk about accrued leave as authorized by law. And just want to put on the record that compensatory leave, whether that is paid out to an individual or not, is actually not set by law. That is at the discretion of the jurisdiction. So appreciating that this is a conceptual amendment, and I'm sure that LCD will be able to draft that in a way to reflect that. But again, very much want to say thank you to the Majority Leader for bringing this bill forward, and we are very much in support of this measure. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We'll continue with those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 385.
For the new callers, to testify in support of Assembly Bill 385, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go to those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 385.
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 385, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 692, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mary Przinski, MaryPierczynski, representing the Nevada Association of School Superintendents. And we are opposed to the bill as it has been originally written. We so much appreciate Assemblywoman Benitez-Thompson meeting with us to discuss our concerns, and we will continue to work with her. We appreciate the amendment, but we still have questions regarding applicability, bonus questions, benefit questions, some key issues that we need to make sure we understand fully before we can come forward and support. Thank you.
And thank you. Next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 385.
Chair, there are no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 385.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 385, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, with the last 3 digits of 978, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores. Joanna Jacob, JOANNA-JACOB, Government Affairs Manager for Clark County. Good morning to you and the committee. I am a neutral on this bill after the discussion here today and many of the concerns that have been put on the record and clarified. I would like to say we are working with the majority leader on the amendment at this time. Still waiting to see how the language comes out, which is why I am testifying in neutral, Mr. Chairman. We did have some concerns with the original language. The majority leader has worked with us on this conceptual language. Clark County will continue to work with majority leader just because of the size of our organization and the fact that we have many agreements, bargaining units, managers. We did take during the last year, we did do voluntary separation program. The original bill would have prevented us from doing that. We appreciate the majority leader from with the conceptual language. I think that is now out of the bill. The other thing that we still need to work on is probably on the fringe benefit piece. We do have managers and employees that categories of benefits that are extended to our department heads and our and beyond just the employees. So we want to continue to work with the majority leader on that conceptual language and the actual amendment that will be written up. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wanted to get this on the record. We do thank the majority leader for working with us on this bill.
Thank you. And we'll continue with those wishing to testify in the neutral position to Assembly Bill 385.
Caller, with the last 3 digits of 964, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Mary Walker, MaryWalker, representing Carson City, Douglas, Lyon, and Story counties. I want to thank Madam Majority Leader for working with the counties on this bill. We sincerely appreciate it. We're happy to continue to work with her on this important legislation for further clarification on the fringe benefit piece and others. I believe this is a good government bill. It is attempting to rein in excesses in manager compensation in cases where there is an investigation of wrongdoing. When these excesses exist, it reflects on everyone. City and county managers are some of the hardest working people I have ever met. And this compensation excesses in some areas, unfortunately, it reflects on them all. I want to thank the Majority Leader for bringing this bill forward, and I look forward to continuing working with her. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I hope you are well.
And thank you. Next caller wishing to testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 385.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 385, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, with the last 3 digits of 888, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, members of the committee. My name is Vincent Guthrow. I serve as the Deputy Director of the Nevada Association of Counties, or NACO. My name is spelled V like Victor, I-N-S-O-N. Last name is Guthrow, G-U-T-H-R-E-A-U. NACO wanted to testify in the neutral position today to thank the sponsor of this legislation. We appreciate the Majority Leader's intent of this bill. We echo the previous comments of the neutral testimony, and again, thank her for working with counties to understand our perspective. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to testify today.
Thank you. And we'll continue with those wishing to testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 385.
Chair, there are no more callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. Next, we'll go back to our majority leader and any closing remarks you may have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. No, I appreciate the comments, and I think the one area where I've been working with local government is because of some of the trends we've seen emerge around this. They actually haven't been coming from the county levels, and mostly you see our county boards, our elected county boards, be really, have very good practices about how they consider fringe and bonuses and severances for their employees. And so that's why you see that ongoing conversation, because this bill is not about penalizing good, solid government practices. It's about reining in some trends that we see playing out in other types of governments. And we appreciate their feedback. And ultimately, I think that this is good policy.
Thank you, Majority Leader. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 385. I trust that our Majority Leader will work with all the stakeholders and get them to a comfortable place. So with that, next on the agenda, we have public comment. And I want to remind those of you wishing to testify during public comment, we want you to do it. We encourage you to call. I just want to remind you of the quick ground rules. This is not a time to reopen the hearing, so please ensure that you keep your comments broad in any general matter that falls within the purview of our committee. I just don't want you to try to reopen the hearing and then have to cut you off. So with that, we'll go to public comment. Broadcast, please.
To take place in the public comment queue, please press *9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits of 213. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 213. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIE My brother Thomas Purdy was 38 years old and a father of 2 and loved by many, including myself and my father and brothers and sisters. When he was hog-tied by Reno police officer Good, Maxwell, Tallman, and Aparicio, and then dumped at the Washoe County Jail, still hog-tied and then asphyxiated to death. Today I'd like to talk about 28-year-old Joseph Michael Justin. On August 22nd, 2007, Joseph Justin was identified as a burglary suspect and apprehended by LVMPD officers Splinter and Nick Athodes. Within 45 seconds, Justin was gunned down. Witnesses on the scene stated they never saw Justin with a firearm in his hand. Splinter, who shot first, claimed that she saw Justin hold a pistol to his temple and then point the gun at her, prompting her to shoot. Nicoles followed her and fired. Justin was shot in the leg and in the back and died from his wounds. Splinter is currently captain and the bureau commander of the Office of Internal Oversight and Constitutional Policing, which oversees internal investigations of police homicides. We believe police should not be able to investigate themselves, but since they do, investigations shouldn't be led by someone who has taken someone from the community. LVMPD has had 13 years to return Justin's belongings to his family, yet all they have received is an identification card. The family is demanding the immediate return of his belongings so they can have some closure and continued healing. Thank you. Please do not support bills that protect police further. Please support bills that promote transparency and accountability. Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. And next, we'll go to the next caller wishing to testify during public comment.
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no more callers at this time.
Thank you. Members, thank you for powering through this week. I appreciate everybody coming in prepared. So next week we'll proceed in one of two ways, and really it's up to the committee how we go about it. As you all know, we have an incredibly heavy agenda next week where we're hearing 3 or 4 bills per day. And we'll use Monday start time of 9 a.m. as a indicator of whether or not we can continue to do that. Obviously, I understand the benefit of giving everybody that additional hour. I think we've reaped the benefit of that. So if Monday we cannot do the 3 hearings effectively and the presentation, then we'll have to move starting on Tuesday to an 8 a.m. or 7:30 a.m., depending on how slow we're working through that start time. If we do our homework, I know this weekend we're going to be with family, but if we do our homework and we prep ahead of time, there's no reason why we can't have 3 or 4 hearings within the allotted time and starting at 9 a.m. so that our questions are very focused and very narrow to the point, and we could continue to reap the benefit of a 9 a.m. start time. But if for whatever reason Monday serves as the opposite and we realize that we in fact can't do that, then the rest of the week we'll just move to an 8 a.m. start time, which is completely fine. So we'll let the committee dictate what it is that we need to do. But for Monday, we'll start at 9, and depending on how that day goes, that will determine how the rest of the week goes. I want to remind you that on Monday, we have a presentation by the City of North Las Vegas. They will also be presenting their charter bill, Assembly Bill 55. Then we'll have Assembly Bill 271. And then lastly, Assembly Bill 437. We'll likely take that out of order. We'll engage Assembly Bill 271 first, followed by Assembly Bill 437, and then we'll do the presentation, followed by the Assembly Bill 55 charter hearing. So that way they can have their presentation immediately followed by their bill presentation, and hopefully that will be a good segue into why they need to do that. Again, I want to thank you all. For those of you who are following us and are questioning when we'll be doing work sessions, know that we plan to do multiple work sessions next week. So just because you don't see a particular item on work session does not mean it won't get one. We just have to parse it out, as we have a lot of them that we need to get on there. So with that, members, I appreciate everybody's work this week. I hope you have a great time this weekend and enjoy your family. This meeting's adjourned.